Okay, this video is thoughts on creativity. I've given previous lectures on genius, on truth, on a whole bunch of things, but this one will especially focus on creativity. There's some overlap between creativity and genius, obviously, but there's a little more details out, working way up, one's way up in creativity before the so-called genius level. Okay, so curiosity is the secret of high creative people. I think that's the key thing. This was a quote by Leo Burnett. And the reason I say that is I know tons and tons of people with high IQs, tons and tons of people who are hard workers. Most doctors got an IQ of about 120. They worked very hard in pre-med, med school to become a doctor. Okay, but the vast majority of doctors are very conformist. They don't do hardly any interesting original thinking. They don't read on their own, or they read, the guys I know who are really bright read about 2 books a month. And then the guys that are just pretty bright read about 1 book a month. Okay, so what I'm trying to say though is creativity is different. Creativity is like an intensity, like this mission to do something in a certain field or an area. It's very different and it's quite rare. Um, to be creative in a field, you first got to learn the field pretty well. Goethe said to learn something complex well, a man must love it, so they make the effort. They got to seek information from a bunch of viewpoints. I've made that point before that people who are like grew up in Europe, they're smarter than people who grew up in America in terms of they know what it's like in France, they know what it's like in England, they know what it's like in Germany, Poland. They've got this perspective that enables them to see things from more than one point of view. For a lot of Americans, unless they've done a lot of reading or have parents from different countries, they're often just sort of very narrow in their thinking abilities. Ask yourself, how can this be improved? Okay. A big thing from a lot of creative geniuses was they like to walk a lot. Here's Beethoven walking while he's thinking. Nietzsche did that. Ralph Waldo Emerson used to do that. As a matter of fact, Beethoven used to go for walks with Johann Wolfgang von Goethe. Okay. And it was kind of funny. There'd be people, fans, standing around looking at them who especially knew Beethoven. And Goethe would say, "Oh, doesn't this annoy you, all these people around?" And Beethoven said, "What do you care? They're here to see me, not to see you." Beethoven was very stuck up. Um, let's see. When you sleep, your mind incubates what you studied all day. And a lot of times idea comes to you in the morning when you take a shower or something else. Creative people, they're usually marathon workers. This is a good book. John Malloy, he wrote a book, How to Work the Competition into the Ground and Have Fun Doing It. And he talks all about highly creative people. They're usually marathon workers. They'll stick with a project for years. And then he says, I think creativity sometimes takes more guts and stick-to-itiveness than it does brains. That's totally true. They're always thinking, rethinking, reviewing, and reordering. That's why they hate beat music. And Schopenhauer had made that point too. And same thing with Goethe. If you're thinking about something, you need quiet and peace and serenity. Bump, 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 beat music. It just makes you stupid. You can't think with that kind of stuff on. You can't think with a flashing light in your face, okay? So you can't think with the TV around. You can't think if your phone's going off every 5 seconds. You need quiet, peace, solitude. A good example is Newton at Woolsthorpe. He took time alone to just really think for a year, and he came up with all kinds of incredible things. Malloy continues, you have to risk being laughed at because you're going to take risks. You're going to say things that seem crazy to other people. You're going to get mocked. You're going to get called autistic, all that stuff. And you have to face the fact that even if you make a breakthrough, it might cost you to get fired. It might make you look like a fool. Risk taking is an essential part of creativity. Yeah, for a doctor, look at, they tried to fire T. Colin Campbell when he made these great discoveries with protein, okay? In academics, it is not like sports. In sports, if you're great, you're celebrated. In academics, when you change the status quo, you get attacked by people that want to fire you, and they don't like it. It's not popular in academics. Academics is childish and dishonest. I can tell you that from a lot of experience in academics. Okay, another word for creativity is courage from Henri Matisse, the artist. Here's another one from Ellis Paul Torrance, who had a lot of experience working with IQ testing and educational stuff. It takes courage to be creative. Just as soon as you have a new idea, you are in a minority of one. Okay, Paul Johnson, the historian, he said, creative originality of an outstanding quality often reflects huge resources of courage. Right. It means when you speak up, you're going to get a lot of people pissed off at you. That's what it actually really means to be creative. And if they're not, then it means you're probably not being that creative. Okay, Henry Heimlich, he was friends with Dr. McDougall. He invented the Heimlich maneuver, the Heimlich chest tube. He says, if everyone understands you, you're not being creative enough. That's a motivator. Here's that quote from Inside the Score. Resources are the enemy of creativity. Yeah, a lot of the best creative work has been done with very little resources. So you don't need all these bells and whistles, all these big fancy universities. Most of the stuff you see on the internet about creativity is a big lie. It'll be just somebody who's promoting a product for a corporation, okay? And a lot of people say things like, "Oh, Steve Jobs is a great creative guy." In some ways, I think he's a jerk. Okay, what is a cell phone? It's just an animal tracker. Okay, is that really a friend of mankind? Cell phone is to track you like a stupid animal. I think cell phones are very overrated. Okay, Kurt Vonnegut, we are what we pretend to be. Oh, these were the quotes from the Tim Ferriss book. It seems like anything that's a real breakthrough seems like a crazy idea the day before. The Peter Diamandis quote. Okay, David Trott, he wrote some good books about advertising. One of them was called Predatory Thinking. It gradually dawned on me what the creative geniuses all had in common was inquiring minds. That's what makes people creative. People who say, why does it have to be that way? That's true creativity. They had it coming off them like sparks. Yeah, they're creative. They're kind of fun. They're inquisitive, trying to push the knowledge in the area. And one of the things I'd say in medicine, anybody going to do creative work in medicine, nutrition, toxicology, you have to have a disdain, a contempt almost, I would say, for the so-called experts, because almost all of them are fake. Look at the medical textbook. The entire medical textbook on, what causes dementia, the lack of information on nutrition, toxicology, it's pathetic. And because once you get it, how stupid those books are, then it's very easy to be motivated and to believe you can come up with something better, because the book stinks. And same thing, and the books stink on hypertension, diabetes, cancer, autoimmune disease, subject after subject, the book stinks. So once you get yourself to that position, then you can now build on top of it. But if you're like the typical, person in medical fields, you're like, oh gosh, this came from Harvard or other Ivy League school or some major medical center. They must know a lot. They must be smart to have been able to work there. How could I ever challenge their thinking? When in reality, they're a bunch of scumbag liars who are paid off to lie. Okay, all right. So, anyways, here's a couple lines from Robert Greene, author of the book Mastery, and that's a pretty good book. He kind of was onto his best book ever was 48 Rules of Power. That's a great book. Mastery was sort of like half good, half kind of lightweight bullshit, but there's some good stuff in there. Here's some of his things. High creativity. This is Robert Greene. High creativity requires high-level knowledge and an open, agile mind. Creativity is by its nature an act of boldness and rebellion. That is true right there. You are not accepting the status quo. That's what I mean by it's so rare in medicine, because as soon as you do something creative, really truly creative in medicine, you're basically saying the status quo is bullshit. Okay, it doesn't work. It's not true. And that takes some guts to do that, because you can get in trouble for doing that. The big players who run the whole system, they make their money off people accepting that status quo, so they don't like it being challenged. He says, make creativity rather than comfort your goal, and you will have far more chance of success. You must know your field inside out, yet be able to question its entrenched assumptions. You must always work with deadlines. Well, deadlines can motivate you. Like if you're going to give a talk, a presentation, or writing a paper and it has to be done at a certain time, that energizes you to get it done. It's another thing why competitions are great. Okay, now here's a guy who I like. His name is Brendan Hurd. He wrote a really nice book. It's called The Decline and Fall of Western Art. It's an excellent book, and I'll just share with you what he said. We will not regain our culture or art of any sort until we earnestly undergo a religious revival. I totally agree with that. That's why you'll hear me say, I'm proud to be a Christian. I will say Christian art isn't just better than art. It's way better than everyone else's art, okay? No other culture, no other religion has produced 10% of the art quality art that Christianity's produced, okay? So you should be proud of it, okay? The reason why I like the Christian tradition, it's produced the best painting, the best architecture with the cathedrals, the best literature. Look at the 3 best novels: Victor Hugo, Les Miserables, Brothers Karamazov, Dostoevsky, Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens, okay? It kicks butt, okay, in literature. And so what I'm saying is, if you want to be a great artist, great writer, great painter, and it was Catholicism produced the science, okay? That's where it comes from. Go ahead and study it. That's proven. All right, you'll see. So anyways, let's go with Brendan Hurd continues. We will not regain our culture or art of any sort until we have a religious revival. To reclaim a metaphysical view, even a rational one, and have a kernel of creativity, there's a slow dawning realization amongst artists and philosophers that we cannot live without a metaphysic. That's with a stated system of values. When we individually or as a society determine that human religion is not true and we do away with the concept of God, it seems that we cannot do so without leaving behind what is best in us. We vividly see our artworks of today, which are all failures, being due to the loss of a spiritual element. The direct relationship between spirituality, religion, and art is fundamental. We need to believe in ourselves in order to have art. Can Western civilization be saved? The puppet masters do not want art or ideas. They want a tactless strip mall and a population of spiritless drones. But our tradition has not gone from us. It is merely hidden. That is Brendan Hurd from The Decline and Fall of Western Art. Yeah, modern art is all fake. It's a joke. Anything a child could make is not real art. That's BS. Okay, and like I said, Rotterdam Museum in Europe, they have statues of turds, of feces. Okay, that's what you get with atheism. It's all crap. It's all junk. It's all garbage. So if you want to be, a legit, creative, successful person and not just a phony, you have to be honest about what's going on. Okay, and most people can't do that because there's peer pressure to be a phony. And like whenever I hear one of these so-called painting art experts praise some modern artwork, I lose complete respect for them. Then I know they're a sellout phony, and they might have to do that to keep their jobs. But how can you take them seriously? Okay. All right, so everyone says diversity. Let me tell you something. Do you need diversity in art? What's really happening is there's different types of diversity. Diversity of knowledge and skill and training. That's a good thing, okay? But when somebody says diversity just because of variety for the sake of variety, that's not necessarily a good thing. Most of the time that's BS. They're just using that as a way to unfairly treat something else, okay? Let's see. Paul Johnson from Creator. Since we are all made in God's image, there is creativity in all of us, and the only problem is how to bring it out. Nathaniel Brandon, he's the psychologist that worked with Ayn Rand. He said, creativity requires leisure. Yeah, you need some time. If you're just worked into the ground, you don't got time to create anything. William S. Burroughs. What does the money machine eat? The money machine eats youth and spontaneity and life and beauty, and above all, it eats creativity. It eats quality and it shits quantity. How I hate those who are dedicated to producing conformity. So yeah, what he's saying is like, look at the medical system. It wants quality, like a factory. It wants to crank out a bunch of billing codes. It doesn't care about quality. It doesn't care if the patient lives or dies. As long as the standard of care is followed, whatever happens to the patient is considered irrelevant. What matters for most, private practice places is how many billing codes did we generate for the day? How many drugs did we sell for the day? How many surgeries did we sell for the day? How many diagnostic tests did we sell for the day? Okay, so what I'm saying is it wants everybody to be like a widget, all interchangeable. But if you do that, you have to lower your quality. You can't make everybody equal because then you block out the high performers. And that's kind of how factory systems are. Okay, look at, building something in an assembly line. What it wants is every single item built to be the exact same. It doesn't want one to be especially good. Okay, Ellis Paul Terrence quote, since I reached the conclusion that the essence of being a creative person is being in love with what one is doing, I have had a growing awareness that this characteristic makes possible all the other personality characteristics of the creative person. Independence of thought and judgment, honesty, perseverance, curiosity, willingness to take risks, and the like. Yeah, that's what I talked to too, like about the line from Sorrow Was a Young Werther where he fell in love with Charlotte is you have to fall in love with what you're doing in order to work through all the problems and the challenges and accept all the disappointments and setbacks. 2 steps up, 1 step back, 2 steps up, 1 step back. And you have to accept all that because otherwise you just say, screw this. I'll show up to my job, whatever it is. I'll do whatever I got to do. I'll make my money. I'll go home. And I know it's a bunch of crap, but I need the money. Okay? That's where you end up if you sort of accept that money's all that matters and you give up on this creativity stuff. Okay. This is Arthur Koestler. And I know these quotes are kind of coming from all over the place, and they are coming from a whole bunch of different sources, but I think that's just how it is when you pursue a topic like creativity. And, what you do if you're interested in these things is you just keep the quotes you want, make your own little collection of quotes. I recommend filing them by author and also filing them by topic. And then they'll be there when you want to use them for whatever, for writing an essay, for thinking, for whatever, making a video, whatever. Just hit the print screen button if you want to save a quote, and then you'll have it available for yourself. Okay, here's Edward de Bono. He wrote a lot of good stuff on creativity. The simple process of focusing on things that are normally taken for granted is a powerful source of creativity. Creativity is the most important human resource of all. Creativity includes breaking out of established patterns in order to look at things in a different way. Jiddu Krishnamurti said, without freedom, there is no creation. Yeah, you got to have freedom. And that's one of the problems when you've got, people aren't allowed to speak freely, is that you have to challenge the current way in order to make something better than the current way. And if you're not allowed to challenge the current way of doing something, how can you make something better? So that's why it's a big deal to have the free ability to speak. David Ogilvy, he's the guy who wrote the book about advertising. The best ideas often come as jokes, so make your thinking as funny as possible. Okay, Arthur Koestler, the more original a discovery, the more obvious it seems afterwards. Yeah, that's true. Because a lot of times it seems obvious afterwards because in a sense it is obvious, but the big breakthrough was being able to push through conventional wisdom and all the obstacles to creative thought that are there. John Gardner, the creative individual has the capacity to free himself from the web of social pressures in which the rest of us are caught. He is capable of questioning the assumptions that the rest of us accept. Yeah, and I had that experience when I was talking to one of my kids. He told me he almost got in a fight with somebody because they were insulting me. They were making fun of me, saying, oh, your dad's kind of a loser. He just sits around reading and studying and writing all the books all the time. What kind of a life is that? He's kind of a loser. My kid's like, you shut up or I'll punch you. And I thought that was funny. It kind of made me happy. I hear that my kid stood up for me, okay? But why do I say that? Is because to a stupid person, and I've had plenty of people say this to me, why the hell would you want to, sit in your office for a couple months on end and write a book? Because to them, that's a complete waste of time. They want to go to the beach. They want to go to a restaurant. They want to have all these experiences. Whereas for me, I feel like, I'm understanding things at a high level as well as anyone in the whole world on this given subject, whatever it is. Of course I want to write a book about this. This is fascinating. This is interesting to me. But to a lot of other people, that just seems bizarre, weird, stupid, like a social loser, that you would sit cooped up in your office for months on end to write a book. What is wrong with you? Why would you want to do that? And unless you're going to write a bestseller and make lots of money, why would you do that? Okay. I thought that was kind of funny because to me it's obvious why I do it, but I know from experience now it's not obvious why I do it to other people. Okay, Paul Johnson from Creators. The art of creation comes closer than any other activity to serving as a remedy for the ills of existence. Yeah, it makes you happy to finish a book, Alfred North Whitehead. Fundamental progress has to do with the reinterpretation of basic ideas. Of course. Aristotle. The aim of art is to represent not the outward appearance of things, but their inward significance. Okay, yeah, that kind of goes back to Schopenhauer, too. What we care most about is not the action in the movie, but the way we identify with the characters and identify with the challenges and obstacles that they overcame. Okay, Michał Csikszentmihalyi, I think he was at the University of Chicago, this guy. He says, the unifying similarity among genius and innovators is motivational. They are interested in unique goals, different than the masses. And yeah, that's what I'm saying too, is it's a personality thing. And that's why I think it's important with kids. If you want your kid to be a high achiever, teach him, to value great achievement and things that make life better for other people. Because I don't know about you, but I know for me, I don't go for that. Just get good grades, get a good job, so you make money, have a good life. I think that, to me, that would make me miserable. I mean, I have to feel like I'm doing something special or worthwhile, or otherwise I can't get motivated. Don't get me wrong, I get motivated enough to wake up early in the morning, work all day, and make money for my family, but I know that in the big picture, in the long run, I have to feel that I'm building towards some good goal, or otherwise my energy gets flat by that. Okay, Alfred Binet said back in 1909, IQ could be increased. Yeah, it's not a fixed quantity. Okay, another quote from Edward de Bono. Business is more interested in creative thinking than any other sector of society because for them it can mean increased business success. Yeah, I think that's kind of funny. The businessmen, they want to make money. So in business, you can't bullshit around and be a liar and a phony because either it works or it doesn't. It sells or it doesn't sell. Versus in academics, you can lie and BS all the time. You can make your own entire career on lying and BSing. Some quotes from Albert Einstein. The more I study science, the more I believe in God. Same thing like with, Newton, okay? The more you learn about real science, the complexity of biology, astronomy, these other fields, the more you believe in God. The people who say, atheism explains things, they're phony BS artists and liars and people paid off. Albert Einstein, if you can't explain it simply, then you don't know it well enough. Aristotle says the same thing. If the proof that you know something is you could teach it. Okay, Einstein continues. The difficulty that has baffled the sages of all times is how to make teaching so emotionally potent that its influence should withstand the pressure of the psychic forces in the individual. It's not that I'm so smart. Okay, so what that's about is, yeah, people like stories. They like drama. All that stuff, good teaching should be a little bit theatrical. That makes it fun and more memorable. And it also should be meaningful. It should be useful. The reason why people can't remember almost anything from grade school and high school, and actually most of college too, is because it's not that useful. Why do medical students forget about 95% of what they learned in medical school? It's because most of it is not that useful. Nobody teaches them you should eat starch, okay? Nobody teaches them a lot of the useful stuff, the real pathophysiology. That's why I joke. I can take any medicine from any medical student from any school in the country and in 1 hour teach them more than they learned all through college and med school. And I'm talking about when they're in their fourth year, just because they almost learn nothing useful. It's weird, but it's true. They've got a base that enables them to learn things. You ask any medical student, what causes atherosclerosis? They don't know. You ask them, what's the main way to prevent coronary artery disease? They don't know. You ask them, what causes insulin resistance? What causes autoimmune disease? They won't know any of this. Why do women live longer than men? They won't know the answer to any of these questions. They never do. What's the zeta potential? They never know the answer. Okay, Albert Einstein continues. It's not that I'm so smart, it's that I stay with problems longer. Bureaucracy is the death of any achievement. Unthinking respect for authority is the greatest enemy of truth. So those are Albert Einstein quotes. Okay, here's Eric Soto. He wrote a really nice book called When Teaching Becomes Learning. Real good insight on teaching. He said, the most eminent scientists and artists are people who see questions where most people see only the prevailing answers. In short, being creative is first a matter of discovering a question. Okay, here's Goethe. To produce the smallest creative work, I need absolute solitude. The truly creative man has no master. He must be allowed to go his own way. Goethe. Okay, Goethe is kind of awesome. He's like, some people call him the German Shakespeare, but he's actually got more useful quotes than Shakespeare. Shakespeare's got more literary quotes that are great, but Goethe's got more quotes about thinking and developing yourself that are great. Okay, Ludwig von Mises. Okay, this is big stuff from Ludwig von Mises. He says, society cannot contribute anything to the breeding and growing of genius men. A creative genius cannot be trained. There are no schools for creativeness. A genius is precisely a man who defies all schools and rules and who deviates from the traditional roads of routine and who opens up new paths through land inaccessible before. A genius is always a teacher. He is always self-made. The first thing a genius needs is to breathe free air. Innovators and creative geniuses cannot be reared in schools. Okay, that's a bit of a repeat. They are precisely the men who defy what the schools taught them. So anyways, what that's basically about is, yeah, one of the reasons why a real genius is going to have a problem in some fixed dogmatic system is because they're improving things, changing things. But I also think, you can't really be a genius in medicine when you're 20 years old or even 25. You just don't know enough yet. It's until once you've learned a lot, then you can start pushing the envelope and developing new things. There might be some fields, math for some reason, you got a lot of young geniuses, but in a lot of biologic and medical sciences, you don't see the geniuses popping up until their 40s or even late 40s and 50s, Look at all these nutrition geniuses. They're a bunch of old people, okay? Caldwell Esselstyn, T. Colin Campbell, John McDougall, for example. I'm like a young kid on the block, and I'm just about 60 years of age, okay? Okay, now here's some stuff from a book called The Creative Brain, The Science of Genius by Nancy Andreasen. And oh, by the way, I'll say a few things that Jordan Peterson said. Jordan Peterson says creativity is a great thing, but it's hard to measure and hard to test because the creative person does things that are out of the norm. So how do you measure something that's not part of what people normally do? He mentions that creative people love doing their creative work, but it's very hard to monetize. That's all quite true. Okay, now from this book called The Creative Brain, Science of Genius by Nancy Andreasen. She's an MD. She also had a PhD in Renaissance literature, which is an interesting combination. She makes the point that intelligence and creativity are not the same thing. And a lot of people who are quite creative, they're not that intelligent in terms of having a real high IQ. Like I said, most of my high IQ doctor friends, they don't care about anything. They just do their job, make their money, go home, and spend time with their families. That's what they want to do. and I'll know them for years, and they'll never ever once tell me they read a book. They'll never have much desire to say anything new or original. But I know they're very bright. They understand things like that, but they don't ever do anything creative or original. And like I said too, I've known some people who graduated second in their medical school class, and I spent a lot of time with them, and they never ever did anything creative or original. Never, not once. Let's see. So yeah, personality. And I think it's a sense of mission, a sense of a desire to prove or do something. Okay. And then another thing I would say is to just be a good student. That's being a good student. To be a fantastic student, that's being a prodigy. To know, to learn what is being taught. Okay, somebody who learns fast. And the next step up is to be a great scholar. But a scholar still implies somebody who really knows what's in the books, maybe in the scientific literature, but they're simply reproducing what's already known. They're conventional thinkers. Okay, an innovator, a maverick is somebody who's doing something new and different. That's good. They might not even be the biggest scholar, but they've got the guts, the courage to do something new. So that's a maverick. An innovator or a genius transforms an entire field. An innovator maybe transforms one part of it. A genius transforms the whole field in a big way. So those are higher levels. So what I'm trying to say is there's a lot of prodigies. There's a lot of skilled learners and students, but mavericks, innovators, and transformative genius, they're a much higher level, and they're really rare. Okay, now she talks about the Terman studies. Okay, I have another book too where they talked about the Terman. Terman took a whole bunch of really high IQ students, anywhere from 135 to 200, average IQ 151, and he followed them for many years. Didn't produce any Nobel Prize winners, no great creative writers, and so it's kind of funny. They actually produced very little in terms of creativity. I think that's funny because I also think Terman kind of screwed his study in the sense that he pre-selected them a little bit to be a little bit conformist, predictable, hard-working, well-behaved people. But a lot of creative geniuses, they're non-conformists, and also they don't necessarily do well in school. When I was young, I wasn't a good student. I was a behavior problem. I was hyperactive. I was suspended from school several times. I was taken out of my fourth grade classroom, and I was put into a pod, an experimental classroom where I was by myself all day, and I just sat around and read. I read all the SRA books, Scholastic Reading Achievement books, and I didn't like it. I wasn't a bad kid. I could do the homework in 5 seconds, so then I would just goof around trying to make my friends laugh. But what I'm trying to say is if somebody went to my school and asked for good students, they would pick, some conformist kids that were well behaved, always did what the teacher said and raised their hand, and I would be just a jerk athlete. So I think that's part of how Terman picked all his kids to be well behaved and all that. And what he got was a bunch of well behaved, successful in terms of having a career where they were highly competent, but almost none of them did anything interesting. Okay, let's see. Willing to work hard. Yeah, very persistent. I would say persistent is a key trait I've seen in high achievers because they often get knocked down a bunch of times before they finally achieve something big. Creativity clusters itself into certain areas. Like ancient Greek was incredible. Percy Bysshe Shelley said that's the most interesting time that ever occurred in all of history was ancient Greece from about 450 BC to 350 BC. One genius after another: Thucydides, Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, Aristophanes, Aeschylus, Sophocles, Euripides, Pericles. Pericles in his Athens city on a hill, Acropolis, Archimedes, Phidias. It goes on and on. They were amazing, the ancient Greeks, literally amazing. Anybody seriously about developing the brain should study them. There's a very good reason why the ancient Greeks. And all this stuff about all cultures being equal, that is not true. That's bullshit, okay? The most fascinating culture I ever studied was ancient Greece because they believed in free speech, because they had land that was set up with a whole bunch of islands and rocky areas and mountainous areas that no one tyrant could conquer everybody and force everybody to be the same. So you got a lot of different interesting opinions. Okay, Renaissance Italy was another great creative epoch, okay? There was Renaissance events in other countries in that area in Europe, but Italy was the most interesting of them. And, part of it was due to money. The Pope had money like Pope Julius had money in Rome, and he hired Michelangelo and Raphael and Botticelli, earlier Pope. Also, there was a rivalry and there was competition between the artists of Florence, like Michelangelo and Leonardo da Vinci, with Rome. And they wanted to prove they were better. They felt they were better. They knew they were better. And so they actually thought Pope Julius was a pain in the butt. But anyways, competition and rivalry. Also, you have a critical mass of enough people interested in being good at something. All of that drives up achievement. You know, when you can make money for it, drives up achievement. When you got leisure time, so the city has to be wealthy enough. There has to be some freedom, perhaps peace, where the artist can do that instead of being forced to do other things. Okay. The Renaissance artists, they were all competing to see who could make the best painting. And there was something very similar, and I'll call it the Victorian Renaissance in the 1800s, with the group of artists, especially the pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood of artists led by John Everett Millais. They were just miraculous, okay? And then there were a whole bunch of people who followed in their footsteps, like Edmund Leighton and a whole bunch of other ones that produced magnificent art. That's one of the great, if you look at a lot of these paintings I have as thumbnails for my videos, most of them came from the 800s out of this sort of Victorian Renaissance movement. And there was also simultaneously a Catholic Renaissance movement at that time in England. You know, A.W. Pugin was the architect. John Ruskin was sort of the philosopher. Although he was a Protestant, he couldn't help. He was jealous of the Catholic art. Cardinal John Henry Newman and the Tractarian movement. And then the great writers like Charles Dickens in England at that time. Oscar Wilde coming over from Ireland, sort of providing some variety. Now, there's real diversity, thinking from another point of view. So anyways, those are, in my experience, the three greatest intellectual movements, okay? The genius areas, those are all things they had in common. So what I'm also saying is if you want to really develop, try to go somewhere where there's a lot of things happening so it'll catch, it's almost like contagious with you. You'll be like the other people doing it. You want to get good at something. Try to find other people getting good at it or who've already done it and copy them, and the other ones that are trying and spend time with them. That all generates your energy. And try to enter competitions in your field. That generates energy and you get a lot better. So anyways, these are some ideas overall from this book by Nancy Andreasen. Okay. Now here's a quote from Mozart. Yeah, the idea that, it's just, you're just born that way, that's actually not true. The geniuses are people, yeah, they got some basic talent, but they just had fanatical, obsessive development. So nowadays you're kind of taught, extremism is bad, being fanatic is bad, being obsessive is bad. But yes, that's what great people are that are really good at something. They're obsessed with what they're doing. They're fanatics about it. They're just over the top with it. And that's how they get so great. Normal people are nice, but they don't achieve much, okay? They never do anything magnificent, okay? You know, they might be a wonderful friend and family member, but the people who do great, incredible things are these workaholics that are kind of like, you know, almost like maniacs, okay? That's just a fact. Workaholics. Okay, here's a quote from Mozart, typical quote from Mozart. People err who think my art comes easy to me. I can assure you, dear friend, that no one has devoted as much time and thought to composition as I. I have studied diligently the works of all the famous composers many times. Yep. Okay, all right, now here's some stuff from a book called The Genius in All of Us. This one is by David Schenck. And again, it's another book about creativity and how does a person improve their performance. He says, children develop more intellectually if parents talk to them early and often. Read to them early and often. Model an interest in learning and reading. Encourage them. Set high expectations. Yeah, that's a typical professional family, and the kids are going to do better. The kids are already way ahead of kids that come from a household where reading and talking and sophisticated discussion is not encouraged, which is most places. Okay, the growth mindset of Carol Dweck. She's a psychologist from Stanford. The idea that intelligence isn't a fixed quantity, that it can be improved with effort. Yeah, that's obviously true, and it's obviously important. I talked before about the SAT test. It's an achievement test more than an intelligence test. It basically shows where you're at that given moment. But the thing is, a motivated, smart person just keeps on progressing rapidly, and other people, it'll be harder for them to catch up if they don't get going. The younger, the better. Ultra-achievers are irrepressible and resilient and will pursue a goal for years. All great artists and great thinkers are great workers. The true road to success includes developing the most productive attitudes and identifying magnificent external resources. Yeah, finding a good book to learn from, a good video on the internet to learn from, a good coach, a good mentor, a good role model. Those pull you up in your aspirations. And you got to have the right attitude, whatever it might be for your field. And that's why I think a lot of times it comes from religion. Look at Bach. Everything I compose is dedicated to the glory of God. You know, Mozart religious, Handel religious. It goes on and on. Newton religious. That's another reason why I'm a big fan of religion, because I see the longest lived people, they're religious. The greatest creative achievements, they're religious. All these atheistic, modern scumbags, they don't do hardly anything worth looking at. So why should you take their word? They don't know what they're doing. They're incompetent. So, okay. In the end, persistence is the difference between mediocrity and enormous success. Yeah, Michelangelo, all these other ones, they were total workaholics. Competitions generate increased effort. Yeah, same old thing. Look at ancient Greece, Italian Renaissance. Look at some of these countries in Europe in the 1800s, like Vienna, the city or Vienna, whatever. Terman pre-selected for high IQ conformists, and perhaps that's why they relatively underachieved. Yeah, great achievers a lot of times have a chip on the shoulder. They're mavericks. They want to prove something. Okay, and then earlier I talked about this last part. So, anyways, I thought that was a little bit interesting about creativity. Hope it was helpful.